Sometimes I think my life really began the night I threw my wedding ring into the ocean and watched it vanish in the black water. People know me now as Sarah Chen, 36, owner of the Sapphire Bay Resort Group, the woman from that viral beach house scandal who exposed her own in-laws on camera and walked away with her dignity intact. But what they don't know, what I've never said out loud in an interview, or in any neatly packaged Girl Boss article, is that long before my ex-husband's family tried to humiliate me, there was another betrayal that carved its shape deep into me. Mine didn't start with luxury resorts and viral videos. It started in a cramped two-bedroom apartment over a dim-sum restaurant, with the smell of frying garlic in the walls and the sound of my parents arguing in hushed, exhausted voices after midnight. I was born to people who believed that survival was more important than happiness. My parents came to this country with 2 suitcases, a recipe book, and a debt to a cousin who never let them forget it. I grew up watching my mother's hands crack from dishwater and my father's shoulders curve from years of carrying crates up narrow back stairs. By the time I was 16, I knew how to balance a cash register, spot a stolen tip from across the room, and read the tightness around my father's eyes that meant we couldn't afford to replace the broken freezer. In that small world, family was supposed to be everything. Blood was sacred, sacrifice was expected, and loyalty was non-negotiable. That's what they told me. Anyway, I clung to those ideas the way other girls clung to fairy tales. My older brother Daniel was the golden child of this little kingdom. He was 4 years older, taller, louder, magnetic in a way I never was, where I learned to move quietly, to blend into corners with a notepad and a tray. Daniel was all brightness and charm. The regulars loved him. My father adored him. My mother forgave him before he even sinned. From the very beginning, it was understood that the restaurant, the tiny empire they were building with their blood and bones, would one day belong to him. It wasn't even a discussion. Daniel would take over the front of house, charm the customers, expand the business. I would help, I supposed. Somewhere in the background, somewhere out of sight. I used to tell myself I didn't mind. I was the quiet one, the bookish girl who kept a hidden stack of hotel magazines under her mattress. While other kids in our neighborhood dreamed of cars or designer sneakers, I dreamed of lobbies, of tall glass windows and marble floors, and the soft murmur of multilingual guests passing through. When I was 10, I saw a picture of a beachfront resort in a travel brochure someone left on the bus. The sky had the same washed-out blue as our Chinatown summer mornings, but the water was endless, glittering, clean. The caption read, "Where the world comes to rest." I traced the letters with my finger until the paper started to curl. Of course, my parents didn't understand. Hospitality, to them, was the restaurant. Tables crammed too close together, steam fogging up the windows, my mother yelling over the clatter of dishes. When I told them I wanted to study hotel management, my father laughed in that way that wasn't quite cruel, but cut anyway. He said I was chasing fantasies, that only rich people owned hotels. And we were not those people. My mother just looked at the ledger book and said we needed me at the restaurant. Daniel, on the other hand, smiled and said I was smart but too dreamy, and that I should be practical. He said he'd take care of the big stuff and I could help with the numbers. Back then, I thought he meant it kindly. I left anyway. I don't think my parents ever forgave that. I got a partial scholarship, worked 2 part-time jobs, and slept 4 hours a night for years. I learned everything about occupancy rates, seasonal pricing, staff rotations, and guest psychology. While my classmates practiced for corporate internships, I wiped down reception desks at budget hotels and watched how managers dealt with complaints. I taught myself to see the invisible threads that held a property together, the small kindnesses, the unspoken rules, the quiet discipline behind the smiles. By the time I graduated, I knew I didn't just want to work in a hotel. I wanted to own one. The first beachfront property I bought was a dying thing peeling paint, mold in the corners, reviews so bad they were almost funny. I saw it listed in a trade bulletin no one else seemed to care about. To me, it was like finding that old bus brochure again. Only this time I could step inside the photograph. I scraped together everything I had: savings, lines of credit, favors owed, and signed papers with shaking hands. I told no one in my family, not my parents, not Daniel, not anyone. It wasn't that I didn't want their approval. I just already knew exactly how that conversation would go. I could hear the criticism before a single word left their mouths. So I chose silence. Years passed. The little beachfront disaster became Sapphire Bay. Then Sapphire Bay expanded. Then my name quietly slid into business circles that would have laughed at the girl who smelled like dish soap and fryer oil. I built an empire, and at the same time, a distance from my own blood. I told myself I would go back one day and show them. Not to gloat, but to finally be seen. To have them look at me and say, "We were wrong." That childish hope lingered in me longer than I like to admit. The night I threw my wedding ring into the ocean, I thought that chapter of my life was finally closed. I'd confronted my ex-husband's family, signed the divorce papers, reclaimed my power in a very public way. For a while, it felt almost like justice. But life has a cruel way of looping back to the wounds you think you've already healed. A few months after the beach house incident, I got a call that dragged me right back to that cramped apartment over the restaurant, back to the girl who used to fall asleep on sacks of rice in the storage room. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of day that felt like any other spreadsheets, calls with investors, a meeting about a new spa concept. My assistant buzzed me to say there was a family emergency online too. My first instinct was to tell her to say I wasn't available. Old habits. But the word emergency pulled at something I couldn't quite ignore. I picked up. It was Daniel. I recognized the rhythm of his breathing before he even spoke. He sounded older than I remembered, and strange, like he'd swallowed a handful of gravel and was trying to talk around it. He didn't say hello. My name came out of him like a question and an accusation wrapped together. He told me our father had collapsed at the restaurant the night before. Heart attack. He was in the hospital now, stable but weak. Our mother was with him, refusing to leave his side. The words washed over me, confusing and sharp all at once. For a moment, I wasn't Sarah Chen, CEO. I was just the daughter who'd run away. Hearing that the man who'd always seemed unbreakable now lay hooked up to machines that breathed with him, I flew home that afternoon. I could have taken a private jet, but something in me wanted the discomfort of commercial flights, the crowded gates, the sticky tray tables, the crying children 2 rows back. I needed the humbling mundaneness of it, the reminder that for all the ways my life had changed, the world at large remained utterly indifferent. By the time I landed, my phone was full of unread emails and missed calls from my team. I ignored them all and took a cab straight to the hospital. Hospitals smell the same everywhere, chemical antiseptic, fighting a losing battle against fear and sweat and quiet despair. I found Daniel in the waiting area, slumped in a plastic chair that looked too small for him. For a moment, I saw the boy who used to steal extra baozi from the steamer and split them with me behind the dumpster. Then he stood, and the boy vanished, replaced by a man with tired eyes and a weight I couldn't name sitting on his shoulders. He hugged me, but it was awkward, more like two people posing for a photo than siblings reunited. He told me our father was sleeping. He warned me that he looked different, smaller. I nodded, but nothing prepared me for actually seeing him. The man in the bed had my father's face but not his presence. Without the straight, stubborn line of his back and the constant, restless movement of his hands. He looked like someone who had already half let go of this world. My mother sat by the bed, fingers wrapped around his wrist as if she could anchor him there by sheer will. She didn't cry, not in the way I expected. Her grief pooled in the hollows under her eyes, in the way she didn't seem to blink. When she saw me, there was a flicker of something relief, maybe, or resentment, or both. She nodded, a small, tight motion that said more than any dramatic embrace could have. I said I was sorry I hadn't been there sooner. She said nothing. In the silence, machines beeped and someone's footsteps squeaked on linoleum in the hall. The first betrayal of this story didn't come in that hospital room. It arrived later, in a lawyer's office that smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee. But the seeds of it were planted there, in the heavy quiet of my parents' fear, in my brother's restless pacing, in my mother's refusal to meet my eyes. If I had been paying closer attention, maybe I would have noticed the way Daniel flinched every time the nurse came in with a new form to sign. Maybe I would have recognized the evasive calm in my mother's voice when she said, "We'll talk later, after he's better." Instead, I focused on being the dutiful daughter I'd never quite managed to be before paying bills, booking a private nurse, arranging for someone to cover shifts at the restaurant. I told myself I was making up for lost time. I told myself this was what family did. They closed ranks when one of their own was in danger. I didn't realize that somewhere beneath the surface, another kind of calculation was already unfolding, one that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with ownership, legacy, and the cost of secrets carried too long. For the first few days, I slept in a hotel near the hospital, one of mine. It was strange being both the anonymous guest and the hidden owner. The staff treated me with the polished warmth they offered everyone, not knowing the woman in the elevator in yesterday's jeans and an oversized sweater signed their paychecks. I could have told them. I could have had the manager personally escort me to the best suite, sent up a bottle of champagne. demanded all the small courtesies I'd earned. Instead, I stayed in a standard room and stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the air conditioner rumble. Guilt is a louder sound than any machine. On the fourth day, my father woke fully lucid for the first time since the attack. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw recognition give way to something more complicated. Pride, maybe, or regret. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength and said I'd grown thin, that I worked too much. Then he asked, very quietly, if my work was going well. It struck me then how little he knew of my life. He didn't know about Sapphire Bay, or the chain, or the headlines. He had never seen the beach house that made me infamous online. He didn't know that strangers recognized my face, while his own daughter still felt like a stranger to him. I lied. I said things were fine. I said business was steady. I said I had time to help with the restaurant if they needed me. It was the first time in years I'd offered that. And his eyes softened in a way that hurt. He said we would talk when he got home. There was something about the future he needed to discuss with me and Daniel together. The words should have thrilled me. For a moment, I let myself imagine what they might mean: a seat at the table I'd been silently excluded from my entire life. A chance to share responsibility instead of hovering at the edges. I didn't realize that my brother had already been promised a very different conversation. One that did not include me at all. The days that followed blended into a slow, exhausting rhythm: hospital corridors, whispered updates, the strange intimacy of shared crisis. Daniel and I spent more time together in that week than we had in the previous decade. At first, it felt almost like rediscovering an old language, one we had once spoken fluently as children. He brought me terrible hospital coffee. I snuck him snacks from the hotel bakery. We joked about the nurses scolding him for pacing, about how our mother fussed over the blankets like they were her last line of defense against fate. For a brief moment, I believed the distance between us was closing, but closeness can be deceiving. Sometimes it's not reconciliation, just proximity to the wound before the cut is made. On the 7th morning, when the doctor finally cleared my father to be discharged with strict instructions, my mother said she needed to go home first to prepare the house. It was an odd phrasing, too formal, too controlled. Daniel offered to drive her. I said I could come too, help set things up. She shook her head quickly, too quickly, and said there was nothing for me to do. Something tightened in my stomach, a small instinctive warning, but I brushed it aside. I'd been raised to assume I was unnecessary in family matters. Old habits are stubborn things. My father asked me to drive him home. I want to talk to you alone, he said, softly enough that only I could hear. For a moment, I saw something vulnerable in Daniel's face, something like unease. But he covered it with a smile and clapped our father gently on the shoulder before heading to the parking lot with our mother. I watched them walk ahead together, their silhouettes framed against the gray morning light, their shapes bent toward each other in a way that made me feel like the outsider I'd always been. The drive was quiet. My father rested with his head against the window, his breath steady but shallow. I didn't want to burden him, so I filled the silence with small talk: the weather, the restaurant's recent reviews, the expansion of the neighboring dim sum place. He nodded occasionally, present but cloudy, like a man who had lived too many years in survival mode and was finally realizing what exhaustion really felt like. When we reached the apartment above the restaurant, he hesitated at the foot of the stairs. I helped him up slowly, one step at a time. Every creak of the wood felt like a piece of my childhood pressing down on us. The restaurant below was closed for the day: family emergency. The handwritten sign said on the door. The familiar smells of soy, sesame, and aging floorboards wrapped around me as we climbed. Inside the apartment, something felt wrong. It was too clean. My mother had always kept the place tidy, but this was different: not lived in clean, but staged. The framed family photos had been rearranged, some removed entirely. The coffee table was empty, except for 3 neatly stacked envelopes in the center. Each envelope had a name written in my mother's sharp handwriting. One said Daniel, one said Sarah, one said Wai Ming, my father's name. My father stared at them, confused. Your mother has been planning, he murmured, sinking slowly onto the sofa. The cushions dipped under his weight. She worries too much. Worry, that was one word for it. Fear was another, control was a third. I sat beside him, but my eyes were on the envelopes. My own name looked unfamiliar on the crisp paper. Did you know about this? I asked. He shook his head. She mentioned paperwork, but I told her we should wait until I was well. She insisted it was urgent. A flicker of pain tightened his features, though whether it was physical or emotional, I couldn't tell. Before either of us could reach for the envelopes, the door opened. Daniel walked in first, carrying 2 bags of groceries. My mother followed behind him, her face carefully composed, every line of her posture stiff and decisive. She froze when she saw us there, the envelopes untouched on the table. For a fraction of a second, she looked startled, caught. But then her expression settled into calm resolve. "You're home." She set the grocery bags down on the counter. "Good, we can talk now." My father tried to stand, but she motioned for him to stay seated. "It's better if we do this together," she said. The room felt too small, the air too thick, my heartbeat too loud. I didn't like the way Daniel hovered behind her, as though he were bracing for impact. My mother sat across from us and placed her hands in her lap. "Your father and I have made a decision." My father's brow furrowed. "We were supposed to discuss the future, not decide it." She ignored him. "We've drafted the paperwork," she continued. "The restaurant, the apartment, the savings, and the loan from your uncle. We are formalizing the transfer." My pulse slowed, then it quickened. I knew what was coming before she said it. "Everything will go to Daniel." My father inhaled sharply, as if struck. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My mother said it plainly, without hesitation, without apology. "It makes sense. He has always been the one who will inherit. He is the one who stayed." There it was, the story of my life distilled into a sentence. My father looked stricken. "We never agreed on this." "You agreed more than you think," she replied quietly. "Every time she left. Every time she chose her world instead of ours." Daniel stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable now. "Ma, maybe we should—" "I am speaking," she snapped. The room fell into a stunned, brittle silence. I felt my throat tighten. "So that's it," I said softly. "Because I didn't stay. Because I didn't fold napkins in the restaurant forever. Because I wanted something better." My mother's eyes finally met mine. There was no anger there, just a tired, unwavering certainty. "Because you never intended to return. Because you built a life without us. Because you grew too big for this place." The words shouldn't have hurt, but they did. My father pushed himself upright, gripping the armrest. "It isn't fair," he whispered. "She built something too, something we should be proud of." My mother turned to him. "And are we part of it?" she asked. "Did she tell us when she bought her first hotel? Her second? Her 10th? She lives in a world we do not recognize." Then her voice hardened. "And she did not want us there." I felt the accusation like a blow. Not because she was entirely wrong, but because somewhere along the years, I had stopped knowing how to bridge the distance between us. My father reached for the envelope with his name on it, opened it with shaking fingers, and scanned the papers inside. His face went pale. This is already signed." My heart stopped. My mother folded her hands. "He signed when he was weak, but he signed, it is done." My father's voice broke. "I didn't understand what you put in front of me." A trembling quiet filled the room. My mother looked at me again. "You have your world, Sarah, your hotels, your empire. Let Daniel have this one thing, his inheritance, his place." My brother looked between us, guilt flickering over his features. "I didn't ask for this, I swear." But he hadn't refused it, either. I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger was sharp. This was hollowing, like something inside me had cracked open and emptied out. I stood slowly. "This isn't about inheritance," I said quietly. "It's about erasing me." My mother didn't deny it. That was the worst part. She simply said, "We chose the child who stayed." And in that moment, something inside me shifted, not broken, but reformed, a clarity that felt cold and clean. I walked to the table, picked up my envelope, and weighed it in my hand like something fragile and meaningless. Then I set it back down. "You've made your decision," I said. My voice was steady. "Now I'll make mine." I walked toward the door. My father called my name. Daniel tried to follow me. My mother didn't move. Before I stepped out, I looked back just once. "My world didn't become too big for you," I said softly. "You just chose not to walk into it." I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. Some endings make their own sound. I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't cry in the cab. I didn't even cry when I reached my hotel room and closed the door behind me. Instead, I stood there for a long time, perfectly still, staring at the muted reflection of myself in the dark window. Somewhere far below, traffic hummed, a faint echo of a world that kept moving even when mine felt suspended in place. I waited for the heartbreak to arrive, that sharp, drowning grief I had felt years ago when I first left home. But it didn't come. What settled over me instead was something quieter, a hollow ache, like mourning something I had already lost long ago without realizing it. I sat on the edge of the bed and let that truth sink into me like a slow tide. I had been erased from my family long before they ever put it in writing. When morning came, I put on sunglasses to hide the red around my eyes, not from crying, but from the ache of staying awake all night. My phone buzzed with work notifications, emails piling up like snow, My assistant texted twice asking if I needed backup for the investor meeting scheduled for that afternoon. Normally, I replied immediately, but that morning, I felt suspended between two worlds. The girl from the dim sum restaurant, the woman whose name was on towering resort signs across the coast. I answered none of them. Instead, I showered, dressed in the same clothes I'd worn the day before, and drove back to the apartment above the restaurant. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe my father awake, insisting on fairness. Maybe Daniel waiting outside to apologize. Maybe my mother calmer, willing to talk rather than dictate. But when I opened the door, the apartment was empty. The envelopes were still on the table, undisturbed. The silence was heavier than before. I checked the restaurant downstairs. It was bustling again. Customers lined up for lunch. Daniel was behind the counter, smiling in that effortless way he'd inherited from our father. The staff laughed at something he said. He looked normal, as if nothing had happened. Our mother was in the kitchen, ordering suppliers on the phone, her tone brisk and sharp. She glanced up when she saw me. A flicker of discomfort passed through her, gone almost before I could register it, but not gone enough. I stepped closer, and she lowered the phone slowly. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Then why did you leave the envelope?" I asked. "Why tell me at all, if I wasn't meant to come back?" She wiped her hands on her apron. "Because you deserve to know the truth, even if you don't accept it." "And you think this is the truth?" My voice wavered in spite of my attempt to remain calm. "That I don't belong here." She didn't answer immediately. She looked at me the way someone studies a photograph of a place they once visited but don't remember clearly anymore. "You built a life without us, Sarah," she said finally. "You left us behind when we needed you." "I left because this place was suffocating me," I replied. "I left because no matter what I did, it was never enough for you." My mother's expression tightened. "We gave you everything we had, and I'm grateful," I said, "more than you know. But don't confuse gratitude with ownership." That struck something in her. I saw it. A small, sharp flicker of realization that maybe, just maybe, her version of the story wasn't the only one that mattered. But she didn't say anything. So I turned and walked away. This time without waiting for her to call my name. Somewhere behind me I heard the clatter of a walk, the sound of customers talking, the life of the restaurant filling in the quiet places where my family refused to speak truth. By the time I stepped back onto the street, I felt the numbness starting to crack. Pain seeped through the fractures like cold wind. I wasn't ready to face the world yet, but I didn't want to hide either. So I drove without a destination, without a plan, letting the city unfurl around me. Eventually, I ended up at the waterfront, the one place that had always made me feel both small and infinite at the same time. I stood by the railing, watching the waves crash against the rocks, and let the sea air burn the dryness in my throat. The wind whipped my hair across my face. For a moment, I felt like I was 16 again, dreaming of a life no one believed I was capable of. "Everything will go to Daniel." My mother's voice replayed in my mind like a loop. What she didn't understand, what she had never understood, was that I never wanted the restaurant. I never wanted the apartment or the savings or the debt-laced inheritance. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted to stop being seen as the daughter who left instead of the daughter who built something monumental out of nothing. I wanted them to see me not the version they'd constructed, not the silhouette they resented, but me. I leaned over the railing and let my eyes close. For a moment, the sound of the waves became the only thing holding me upright. Then my phone rang. I nearly ignored it until I saw the caller ID, Dr. Patel Cardiology. My father's doctor. A cold panic shot through me. I answered immediately. "Is he okay?" There was a pause on the other end, just long enough for my breath to catch. "He's stable, Dr. Patel said. Relief washed through me so abruptly I felt dizzy. "But he asked for you." The relief evaporated. "Asked for me." "Yes," the doctor continued. "He's awake, lucid, and insistent. He said he needs to speak with you privately. He asked that you come as soon as possible." My heart thudded once, painfully hard. I didn't ask if Daniel and my mother were there. I didn't want the answer. I simply whispered, "I'm on my way," and hung up. The drive back to the hospital felt unreal, like I was moving underwater. My fingers trembled around the steering wheel. The parking lot was full, but I found a space near the entrance. Barely remembering how I got there, I nearly jogged through the halls, ignoring the startled looks from nurses and patients. When I reached my father's room, the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open quietly. He was sitting upright, pale but alert, his hands folded neatly in his lap like he'd been waiting for me. The room felt different than before, calmer, more deliberate. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping his blanket with warm gold. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he motioned for me to sit. I did. He studied my face for a long time, his eyes softening with each second. "You're tired," he murmured. and hurt. My throat tightened. I'm fine. No, he whispered. You're not. The words broke something in me, small but real. He took a shaky breath. Your mother. She thinks she is protecting what she understands. The restaurant is her world. Daniel is her comfort. She believes safety comes from holding on to what is familiar. And me, I asked quietly, what am I? His answer came without hesitation. You are our hope. I felt my breath catch, then why? Because hope scares people who have only known survival. He swallowed painfully. Your mother is wrong. Sarah. I did not mean to sign those papers. I did not understand what she put in front of me. And even if I had, I would never choose one child over the other. I blinked hard, forcing back the sting behind my eyes. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and trembling. I cannot undo what she has done. But I can tell you this, I am proud of you. Of everything you have built. Of the strength you carry. His voice cracked. I wish I had said it sooner. I looked down at our joined hands. For the first time in years, I felt like someone had peeled away the layers of distance between us and seen me clearly. But the ache didn't disappear. Because something else was lying beneath his words. Something unspoken. Why did you call me here, I asked. Really? He hesitated. His eyes flickered toward the door, as if afraid someone might hear. Then he leaned closer. I need your help, he whispered. I froze. With what? He swallowed again, harder this time. There is something your brother has not told you, he said quietly. Something about the restaurant. About the money. About a debt I never wanted you to know existed. My heart plummeted. What debt? He squeezed my hand. The one Daniel took in my name. The room spun. My father closed his eyes, pained. And now they are coming for everything. A cold wave surged through me, freezing everything in its path. Everything, including the truth about why my mother had fought so viciously to keep the inheritance away from me, began to fall into place. And it was so much worse than betrayal. It was a warning. I didn't understand at first. The words hung between us, soft but heavy, like they carried their own gravity. My father's breathing had begun to labor again, but he didn't let go of my hand. His fingers tightened, not painfully, but desperately. Dad, I whispered, leaning closer. What do you mean Daniel took a debt in your name? What debt? He opened his eyes slowly, and in them I saw something I had never seen before. Not disappointment, not frustration, not the tired resignation he often wore. Fear, real, bone-deep fear. He came to me 3 years ago, my father said, his voice thin. He said the restaurant needed a renovation, that customers were going elsewhere, that we were falling behind. He told me he found a lender who would give us fast cash. I told him no. It was too risky. He paused, swallowing hard. But he went anyway. My stomach dropped. In your name? He nodded. My pulse roared in my ears. He forged my signature on the papers. My father whispered. I confronted him when I found out. But by then it was too late. My breath caught. Why didn't you tell me? He looked away, ashamed. Because I didn't want you to see your brother like that. Because I didn't want you to think this family was falling apart. But it was, I said, it has been for years. A silence settled, sad, exhausted, inevitable. Then he continued, voice trembling. The renovations failed. The business didn't pick up the way he'd hoped. And the payments. Sarah, the interest is impossible. The loan wasn't from a bank. It was from someone dangerous. Someone who wants the restaurant, the building, everything. A chill rippled through me. Who? He shook his head. I never met them. Only their collectors. I felt sick. So the inheritance I started? My father nodded slowly. Your mother thinks giving everything to Daniel will save him. She believes if he has full control, he can negotiate, or hide it, or fix the mess. His voice cracked. But she does not understand the kind of people he owes. And Daniel, I whispered, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. My father closed his eyes like the weight of it all was crushing him. He kept it from you because he was ashamed. And because he knew that if you found out, you could fix it. The words stunned me. You think he hid this from me because he expected me to bail him out? My father's expression twisted in pain. He loves you, in his own way. But he has always believed you were his safety net, even when he resented your success. A terrible realization hit me like a blow. My mother's decision wasn't just about punishing me for leaving. It was a desperate attempt to protect Daniel from the consequences of his own choices. So now, I whispered, they've erased me from the inheritance to keep me out of the mess. He nodded. But that won't protect them, I said softly. Not from people like that. I know, he murmured. That is why I called you. He met my eyes, his voice breaking completely now. I'm scared. Sarah, not for myself, for your mother, for the restaurant, for Daniel. I don't know how to make this right. I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness, not yet, but a fierce protective instinct I thought I'd buried long ago. The girl who grew up in this restaurant, who watched her parents grind themselves into exhaustion for a dream too small for all their sacrifice, that girl rose in me like a ghost refusing to stay dead. "Tell me everything," I said quietly. He did, and the more he told me, the worse it became. The loan wasn't $20,000 or $50,000. It was nearly $300,000 ballooning interest, hidden fees, penalties for missed payments. Daniel had made some payments in the beginning, but eventually he fell behind, and when the collectors came, demanding money the restaurant couldn't produce, he'd made the worst decision possible. He promised them collateral. Not the business, not the building. Me, not by name, not openly, but he'd implied something in the paperwork. Something my father didn't understand until it was too late. Something about external personal assets related to family holdings. The moment I understood, my stomach clenched. "He used my existence," I whispered, horrified. "My success, my company, as leverage." My father looked at me with hollow eyes. He told them he had someone wealthy in the family, someone who would pay to keep us safe. My breath shook. He told them I would pay. The betrayal was so sharp it cut through grief like a blade. I stood slowly, unable to sit any longer. My father reached for my hand again. "Please, don't blame him." But I already did. Not in the way I blamed my mother, whose weapon was judgment and resentment. Daniel's weapon was something different. Dependence. He had always loved me in a passive, thoughtless way, the way someone loves a childhood toy they expect to always find in the same place, untouched, waiting. He had never imagined that I might break under the weight of being everyone's solution. My father tried to sit up straighter. "Please, Sarah," he whispered. "Help us. Help him. Help our family." I felt the tears finally rise, not for myself, but for the impossible cruelty of it all. For the father who didn't deserve this. For the mother who was so afraid of losing the world, she understood that she'd sacrificed her daughter. For the brother who had pulled the entire family into a pit he'd desperately tried to hide beneath pride. "I'll fix it," I said quietly. My father sagged in relief, a soft exhale escaping him like a prayer. "But not the way you think." His brow furrowed, confused. "What do you mean?" I said, steadying my breath, that fixing something doesn't always mean saving it. And it doesn't always mean protecting the people who broke it. He blinked. "Sarah, I'll take care of the debt." I continued. "I'll make sure no one comes after you or Mom. I'll make sure the restaurant doesn't get destroyed." His eyes filled with tears. "But Daniel..." I paused, feeling every piece of the truth settle into place. Daniel will face what he's done. I won't shield him. Not from the debt, not from the collectors, and not from the consequences of using me as collateral. My father's lips trembled. "He's your brother." "And I'm your daughter," I said gently. "I deserve to matter too." Silence stretched between us, sad, fragile, honest. For the first time in my life, I saw something like agreement in his eyes. Not approval, not certainty, but understanding. I squeezed his hand once more, then stepped back. "I need to make some calls," I said softly. "I'll come back tonight." He nodded. "Exhausted. Thank you, Sarah." I walked to the door. Just as I reached it, he whispered, "Be careful." I turned, I always am, but the truth was, I wasn't prepared for what waited outside his room. Because sitting on a chair in the hallway, pale and rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap, was my mother. And she had heard everything. She didn't move when she saw me, didn't speak, didn't blink. She sat there in that stiff plastic chair like a woman carved from stone still, silent, and frighteningly composed. The kind of composure that comes right before something breaks. I closed the door behind me gently, but the sound still echoed down the hall. Too loud in the tense, sterile quiet. I stood there for a moment, waiting for her expression to shift anger, disappointment, guilt, anything. But her face stayed as calm and unreadable as a mask. "You heard," I finally said. She nodded once, a small, restrained movement. "Enough. Enough. Not everything, but enough to unravel the story she'd been clinging to like it was a lifeline." I waited for her to scold me, or defend Daniel, or scold him, or blame me, or blame fate, or blame the world for being unfair. Anything would have been easier than this wordless, suffocating quiet. She didn't look at me when she finally spoke. "Your father is weak right now. You shouldn't have upset him." A tiny spark of anger flared inside me, small, but bright. I didn't upset him. The truth did. "The truth is complicated," she murmured, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "No," I said softly. "The truth is simple. Complicated is what happens when people lie to protect the wrong person." Her jaw tightened just a fraction. The first crack in the mask? I sat down beside her, leaving a small gap between our chairs. Close enough to talk, far enough that neither of us could pretend we were comfortable. "All this time," I said quietly, You thought I left you behind. You thought I abandoned the family. She stared straight ahead. You did. No, I whispered. I outgrew the cage you wanted me in. Her breath hitched barely, but I heard it. You think I don't know how hard life was for you? I continued. I watched you work until your fingers bled. I watched you cut coupons to stretch groceries. I watched you take on every burden without complaint. But I also watched how you chose Daniel every time. Even when he hurt the family. Even when he lied. Even when he forged a signature that could cost us everything. She flinched at that. Don't pretend you didn't know. I said more gently this time. You knew he was drowning. You just hoped he'd float long enough for the debt to disappear. Her voice trembled when she finally answered. He is my son. So am I whispered. Your daughter? She closed her eyes. And then finally her composure cracked. It started as a sharp inhale. Then her shoulders shook. Just once. Her fingers dug into her palms. She lowered her head. For the first time since I was a child, I saw my mother cry. Not loud sobs, not dramatic grief. Just silent tears sliding down her face, carving soft, broken lines through the strength she wore like armor. I didn't want you to see how badly things were falling apart, she whispered. You had your own life, your own success. You were happy. I didn't want to bring you back into this mess. I am part of this family, I said gently. Even when I'm not here, I'm part of it. She wiped her cheeks with the edge of her sleeve. And that's exactly why I tried to keep you out. Because every time you walk into the room, he changes. Her voice wavered. He looks small next to you. He makes foolish choices to feel big again. He tries to prove he is not the disappointment he secretly fears he is. The words pierced me. Not because they excused him, but because they revealed the shape of her fear. She wasn't protecting Daniel. She was protecting the version of him she desperately needed to believe in. The debt, I said softly. It's worse than you told me. She hesitated, then nodded. Collectors came to the restaurant. She whispered. Twice. Once when your father was out. Once when only Daniel and I were there. Her voice thinned. They said if the next payment didn't come soon, they'd take the deed, the business, the building, all of it. And Daniel, I asked. He told them he had access to money through you, she admitted. He claimed you would help, that you always helped. I swallowed, hard. He didn't ask you, she continued. He just assumed. And when the collectors realized we had a successful daughter, they became more aggressive, more impatient. Her eyes shone with fresh tears. That's why I wanted you out of the paperwork. Not because I wanted to erase you, because I wanted to keep them from seeing you as part of this family's assets. The word assets stung. Not because she meant it cruelly, but because she meant it literally. You should have told me, I whispered. I was ashamed, she said. Ashamed of him? Ashamed of myself. Ashamed of how far we had fallen. I nodded slowly. I understand that. Then, but hiding it didn't make the danger disappear. She closed her eyes. I know. Silence stretched between us, uncomfortable, raw, but finally real. After a long moment, she looked at me again. You said you'll fix it, but not in the way I think. Her voice was shaky. What does that mean? I inhaled deeply. It means I'll pay the debt, I said, but I won't save Daniel from the consequences. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her sweater. He will be furious. He will be alive, I said. She didn't argue. And after this, I continued calmly. There will be boundaries. Real ones. I'm not your safety net. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm your daughter, and I deserve to be treated like one. My mother looked at me for a long time. Then, in a soft, trembling voice, she said the last thing I ever expected to hear. You're right. I froze. She wiped her face again. I haven't been fair to you. Not for years. Her voice cracked. I didn't know how to love a child who didn't need me. I felt something in my chest loosen painfully, beautifully. I've always needed you, I whispered. Just not in the way you expected. We sat there in silence, the weight of years between us dissolving bit by tiny bit. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Just enough. After a few minutes, she stood. Let's go home, she said quietly. Your father will rest better knowing we're together. I nodded, but when we reached the elevator, she paused. Sarah, she murmured without turning. Whatever comes next, don't let them hurt you. I felt an unexpected swell of warmth in my chest. I won't, I said softly, not again. The elevator doors opened, and standing inside disheveled, pale, eyes frantic was Daniel. He froze when he saw us. His gaze darted to our faces, searching for clues, calculating what we knew. Then he whispered almost inaudibly, You talked to him, didn't you? And in that moment, I saw it all. The fear, the guilt, and the terrible, unmistakable realization. He wasn't afraid of losing the restaurant. He was afraid of losing me, because I was the only one left who could save him from the consequences collapsing around his feet. He stepped out of the elevator slowly. Like a man approaching the edge of a cliff he didn't realize he'd been walking toward until it was too late. His eyes were wide, red-rimmed, the pupils darting between my face and our mother's, searching, pleading, calculating. I knew that look. I'd seen it once, years ago, when he was caught stealing from the register to impress a girl from school. Back then, he'd been 17, scared, ashamed. Back then, he still thought consequences were negotiable. Today, there was something darker in his eyes. "Sarah," he said, breathless. "Listen, I can explain." I didn't answer. My mother didn't answer. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. He swallowed hard. His voice cracked. "You talked to him. He told you everything." I kept my posture still, steady, unreadable. "He told me enough." Daniel's face crumpled. Not the way a repentant man breaks, but the way a cornered man collapses under the weight of all the lies he can't hold up anymore. He dragged a hand through his hair, pacing once before stopping in front of me. "Sarah, it wasn't supposed to be like this. You weren't meant to be involved. You have your own life. I didn't want to drag you into our problems." "Our problems," I echoed softly. "Yes," he insisted, voice rising. "Our problems, the restaurant's problems, the family's problems." "You mean your decisions," I corrected. He flinched. "Your forgery, your loan, your promises to people you shouldn't have been dealing with, your lies to Mom and Dad." I paused. "And your assumption that I would clean it all up." His lips trembled. "You always fix things. You always take care of everything." I stared at him, stunned. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't even denying it. He was confused, hurt. Even that I wasn't falling into the same pattern. "Daniel," I said slowly, carefully, "you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. A selfish, dangerous, reckless choice. And you didn't just risk the business, you risked our parents' safety, their home, their future." He shook his head rapidly, as if he could reject reality through sheer force. "I did it for the restaurant. You don't understand. That place is everything. It's Dad's life, Mom's pride, our legacy." "No," I said calmly. "It's what you think will save you from feeling like a failure." His breath caught. My mother brought a hand to her mouth, eyes flooding with tears again. Daniel looked between us, his facade cracking open. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be the one who stayed behind while you—" He gestured helplessly, as if he couldn't even find the words. "While you became you. Do you know what it's like to watch your little sister become—" His voice broke. "Become everything you wanted to be." The confession hit me like a punch. Not because it shocked me, but because of how achingly familiar it sounded. I saw it all then, every small resentment, every forced smile, every time he avoided conversations about my work, every strained holiday, every awkward family dinner where my success hovered in the background like a ghost no one dared acknowledge. Jealousy, not the petty kind. The kind that festers in silence, turning into shame and self-loathing and desperation. "I wasn't trying to overshadow you," I said softly. "I know," he whispered, then louder, harsher. "But you did." He pressed his hands to his face, voice cracking. "I stayed. I stayed because someone had to. Someone had to carry the damn restaurant while you chased your dreams. Someone had to take care of them when Dad got sick the first time. Someone had to deal with the inspectors, the taxes, the failing stove, the leaking ceiling, the customers complaining about portions." His shoulders shook. "I kept waiting for someone to thank me. But you, Mom, Dad, everyone just acted like it was what I was supposed to do." My mother let out a small, broken sound. "Daniel, we never wanted—" "Yes, you did," he snapped. "You wanted the easy child and the golden child, and I became both because she wasn't here." His voice echoed down the hallway. A nurse glanced over, but didn't intervene. Daniel took a shuddering breath. "I was drowning, and no one saw it." I closed my eyes. God, I understood him in that moment more than I wanted to. But understanding is not the same as excusing. When I opened my eyes again, my voice was steady. "Daniel," I said, "you made a mistake." He barked a laugh, painful and sharp. "A mistake. I forged Dad's signature. I lied to Mom. I promised money I didn't have. I talked to the wrong people. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I messed up." "Yes," I said, "you did." He looked at me with something like hope, small, fragile, desperate. "But you'll fix it, right? You always do." There it was. The wound beneath every word he'd said. The entitlement wrapped in pain. The expectation wrapped in admiration. The dependency wrapped in resentment. I inhaled slowly. "I'll fix the debt," I said. "But I won't save you from yourself." His face drained of color. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "I will deal with the collectors. I will protect Mom and Dad. I will keep the restaurant from being taken." I paused deliberately. "But you will not be in control of anything, not the business, not the finances, not the decisions." He stared at me, horrified. You're taking it from me. I'm taking responsibility. I corrected. The thing you never learned to do. He shook his head. No, no. Sarah, please, if you take this, I have nothing. My mother stepped forward, tears clinging to her lashes. Daniel, she said softly, you'll always have us. He didn't even look at her. He only looked at me. Sarah, he whispered, don't do this. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I'm not punishing you. I'm saving the family. But I won't let you use me again. I won't let you drag them down again. And I won't let you hide from what you've done. He blinked rapidly, eyes burning. I thought you came home to save us. I did, I whispered. But saving isn't the same as surrendering. He staggered back as if I'd physically struck him. The light inside him flickered pain, disbelief, betrayal, but beneath it all was something else. Relief. Because maybe for the first time in his life, someone was finally telling him no. He didn't thank me. He didn't rage. He didn't collapse. He just whispered, then I guess I deserve it. My mother reached for him, but he stepped away. I need air, he said, voice hoarse. He brushed past us and disappeared down the hall. My mother wiped her face, trembling. You were harsh. I was honest, I said, for once. She breathed out shakily. What now? Now, I said, I protect the family. I reached for my phone. There were 3 calls I needed to make. One to my legal team, one to a private investigator, and one to a man I never wanted to speak to again. Someone who owed me a favor from a murder I saved years ago. Someone with connections in all the places respectable people pretended not to know existed. I exhaled, steadying my heartbeat. No more secrets, I whispered. Not to my parents. Not to Daniel. Not to myself. My mother nodded, eyes softening with something like faith. Whatever you're going to do, she murmured, do it quickly. I will. We started toward my father's room. But before we reached the door, my phone buzzed. A text? Unknown number? Where is my money? A chill ran through me. Another message followed 3 seconds later. Tell your brother we don't wait. And then, you have 48 hours. My mother saw the screen. Her breath stopped. Mine didn't. I lifted my chin. For the first time in the entire ordeal, I felt something sharp and powerful ignite inside me. A storm rising. They picked the wrong family. The message glowed on my screen like a threat carved into stone. You have 48 hours. My mother's hand trembled against her chest. Sarah, what does that mean? What are they going to do? I locked my phone and slipped it into my coat pocket. Nothing, I said calmly. Not to us. But I said nothing. She fell silent at the tone in my voice, not harsh, just certain. A certainty she had never heard from me before, the certainty of someone who had built empires out of ruins. Inside my father's room, the machines beeped softly, a fragile metronome of his survival. He opened his eyes when he heard us enter. My mother went to his side immediately, smoothing the blanket as if the gesture could anchor him to the world. I stood at the foot of the bed, watching him breathe, and felt the weight of all the unspoken years settle into my bones. He looked at me. There was something new in his eyes. Not fear, not shame, not even hope. Trust. I made my calls, I told him quietly. He nodded, though he didn't ask what calls I meant. He trusted me enough not to need the details. I'm going to fix this, I continued. But first, I need to see the paperwork Daniel signed. My mother stiffened. It's at the apartment, hidden under the loose plank near the safe. Of course she knew where it was. Mothers always know where the bones are buried. I'll get it, I said. My father reached out weakly. Sarah, be careful. I touched his hand gently. You taught me to survive. I learned. I left the hospital and drove straight to the apartment. The restaurant downstairs was still buzzing, customers laughing, chopsticks clinking, steam clouding the windows. It made my chest tighten. They were eating happily, unaware of the catastrophe simmering in the walls above them, like a pot left on high heat. Upstairs, the apartment felt different than before. The air was dense, heavy, as if the walls remembered the argument, the tears, the secrets revealed. I crossed the living room, knelt beside the bookshelf, and lifted the loose floorboard my mother had mentioned. There they were, a stack of papers tied with a rubber band. I unfolded the topmost page and bile rose in my throat. The contract was worse than anything I'd imagined. Predatory interest, compound penalties, hidden clauses that practically screamed extortion, and a section near the end, written in vague but dangerous legal jargon, third-party collateral in the form of future earnings or assets to be seized at lender's discretion. Daniel had initialed it, and below his forged signature, my father's shaky one. I didn't realize I was shaking until I noticed the paper trembling in my hands. I read the dates, the amounts, the clause that allowed the lender to seize the property within 72 hours of default. The restaurant wasn't just at risk. It was already gone, unless I stopped it. I swallowed hard, put the papers back into the envelope, and stood. My head felt too full, stuffed with rage, Grief. Responsibility. The kind of responsibility that breaks lesser people. I closed the floorboard carefully, almost reverently. This apartment held decades of my family's pain and pride, and I couldn't let it become collateral damage. As I headed to the door, my phone buzzed. A message this time from a number I recognized. Evelyn Legal. We received your request. Meeting at your suite in 2 hours? Bring all documents? Then another. And Sarah, be prepared. This is going to get ugly. I exhaled slowly. I know, I murmured. It already is. As I stepped out of the apartment, the evening air hit me the smell of soy sauce, engine fumes, and the faint scent of ocean wind drifting in from the harbor. My childhood wrapped around me like a memory soaked in grief. I made it halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn immediately. Sarah, Daniel said. His voice was small. Not pleading, not angry. Empty. I turned. He stood under the flickering street lamp, shoulders hunched, eyes shadowed and exhausted. He looked 10 years older in a single day. He lifted a cigarette to his lips, then lowered it again, unable to light it with shaking hands. I knew you'd come here, he said. I didn't answer. He took a few slow steps closer. Not enough to invade my space, just enough to exist in it. I didn't mean for things to get this bad, he said softly. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. You couldn't, I said, because you weren't trying to fix the problem. You were trying to hide it. He winced. A long silence stretched between us. Then very quietly he said, I'm not the son Dad thinks I am. I held his gaze. Then be better. He laughed a broken, hollow sound. You make it sound so easy. It isn't, I said, but it's possible. The wind rustled the plastic bags on the curb. Somewhere, a bus honked. City life continued around us, as if we weren't standing on the crater of our family's destruction. Daniel looked at the envelope in my hand. You saw the contract? Yes. He nodded slowly. Then you know I'm screwed. You're accountable, I corrected. He let out a shaky breath. Is that what this is? A lesson? A punishment? No, I said, it's the truth, and it's time you dealt with it. His jaw tightened. You're taking everything, aren't you? I'm saving everything. By taking control. Yes. He stared at me for a long time, searching, resenting, needing, drowning. Then he whispered, will you hate me if I tell you something? My chest tightened. Tell me. He looked away, voice trembling. I didn't just take the loan for the restaurant. I gambled. I thought I could double it. I thought I could fix everything without anyone needing to know. I was desperate. Sarah. His voice cracked. And stupid. And jealous. And scared. My breath left me in a slow exhale. There it was. The full truth. Not the polished version he'd rehearsed. Not the half-lie he fed our parents. But the confession of a man cornered by his own failures. I messed up, he whispered. Not once, repeatedly. And every time I failed, I told myself you'd fix it if I couldn't. Why, I asked. Voice soft but unyielding. Why did you think that? He closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. Because you're the only one in this family strong enough to save us. The words hit me with the force of a lifetime. Not praise, not manipulation, just truth. Truth wrapped in burden, dependency, love, bitterness. All the contradictions of a family stitched into a single sentence. I stepped closer, not to comfort him, but to look him in the eyes. You're wrong, I said gently. I'm strong enough to save Mom and Dad. And the restaurant, I paused. But I won't save you from what you've done. Not this time. He nodded slowly, tears falling freely now. I know, he whispered. And maybe that's fair. I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. A bridge. Damaged but not destroyed. Daniel, I said quietly. He looked up. You have 48 hours. After that, I take over completely. No more lies. No more hiding. No more risking our family's life to protect your pride? He swallowed. And me? I said, start over. The hard way. He nodded. Then almost too softly to hear. Thank you for not giving up on us. I exhaled. Thank me when this is over. He managed a small, broken smile. I will. I turned to leave. But as I reached my car, a cold voice echoed from behind the alley. Well, looks like the Chen family reunion finally ended. Daniel froze. I stiffened. A tall man stepped into the streetlight's sharp suit, darker eyes, a smirk shaped like menace. He flicked something shiny between his fingers. A switchblade? And then he looked at me. Miss Chen? He drawled. We need to talk. The switchblade glinted once beneath the street lamp, just enough to catch the cold metal edge and send a thin ribbon of silver flickering across his knuckles. The man twirled it casually, like a toy he'd grown comfortable with. Too comfortable. Daniel stiffened beside me, his breath caught somewhere between his lungs and throat. I could feel the tension rolling off him, the old instinct to run, the newer instinct to freeze, and the buried, fragile hope that someone else would step forward and handle the danger for him. This time, someone would But not in the way he expected. The man stepped closer. His shoes made no sound on the cracked pavement. His suit was expensively tailored, but not new. His hair slicked back with too much product, his jaw sharp enough to slice through softer truths. Formidable, but not invincible. Miss Chen, he repeated. Voice smooth as lacquer, but tinted with the kind of venom men like him learned early and used often. I was hoping to meet you sooner. You're a hard woman to reach. I stepped forward before Daniel could speak slowly, deliberately, letting the air between us solidify with tension. I met the man's gaze without flinching. I didn't think you were in the business of polite introductions, I said calmly. He smirked. Fair enough. His eyes slid briefly to Daniel. Though I see you inherited your brother's talent for dramatic timing. Daniel swallowed. She has nothing to do with... Daniel, I said without looking at him. Stop talking! He obeyed immediately. The man's smile widened. Oh, I see who really runs the family. I didn't rise to the bait. State your business. He flicked the knife shut. The sound was soft, almost polite, but it reverberated like a warning shot. My business, he said, is the same as it's been for months. A debt was taken. A debt hasn't been paid. And we don't like loose ends. I'm here, I said. Consider your loose end tightened. He tilted his head, studying me. I like your confidence. But let's be clear. Your brother owes us a lot of money. I know the amount. You know the penalty. Yes, he shrugged. Then you know this is not the kind of arrangement that's settled with checks and smiles. Neither am I. That made him pause. Just a fraction, but enough. The streetlights hummed. A car door slammed somewhere in the distance. The city breathed around us, oblivious to the storm brewing in a Chinatown alley. The man slipped his hands into his pockets. You're brave, he said. Brave people die first in my line of work. I'm not brave, I said. I'm prepared. He laughed softly. Prepared for what? Paying us off, hiding your family, calling the police. No, I said. Prepared for a conversation you didn't realize you walked into. His eyes narrowed. For the first time, uncertainty crept in. Good. That loan Daniel signed, I continued, was illegal, predatory, unlicensed, which means that contract isn't enforceable in court. You forged clauses, you threatened my family, and you pressured a medical patient for a signature. That's not just unethical, it's criminal. He smiled slowly. We're way past legalities. Miss Chen, you're not buying a hotel. You're negotiating with men who don't lose. My tone didn't change, but you will. A silence fell. Sharp. Metallic. He stepped closer, too close, and I could smell the faint scent of cologne mixed with tobacco. And how do you plan to make me lose? He asked quietly. I didn't blink. By reminding you that you're stepping into a battlefield you don't understand. Something flickered in his gaze. Enlighten me. I nodded once. First, I said, I know exactly who you work for. And I know your organization is under investigation. My legal team has been gathering evidence for years for a case unrelated to my family, but your involvement in this loan gives me leverage. Daniel's head snapped toward me in shock. The man's jaw tensed. Second, I continued, you're dealing with me, not Daniel, not my parents, me, and I don't scare easily. He stepped even closer. Then I haven't tried hard enough. Before Daniel could move, I held up a hand. He froze. The man's breath ghosted across my cheek, warm and threatening. You think your empire makes you untouchable, he murmured. No, I said, but my alliances do. He leaned back a little. Just a little. Enough to reassess me. Enough to see I wasn't a trembling daughter or a frightened bystander. Enough to understand the implications. And what alliances are those, he asked. I gave him a cold, quiet smile. Ones that have everything to gain by taking you down. He blinked. A fraction of hesitation. A spark of unease. Go on. I kept my voice steady. Your group is trying to expand into waterfront properties. Sapphire Bay controls every luxury beach development within 80 miles. Every investor, every contractor, every supplier you would need. Their loyalty is with me, not you. His nostrils flared. Your collectors, I added. Barred from all 17 of my properties as of 10 minutes ago. Your shell companies flagged. Your accounts being tracked. Your lawyers already receiving cease and desist notices. His facade cracked. A tiny fissure. You're bluffing, he whispered. I don't bluff. I said, I build... The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric. Finally, he stepped back. Not much, but enough to acknowledge the shift in power. You're dangerous, he said softly. So are you, I replied. But the difference is your kind hides in shadows. Mine builds empires in daylight. He stared at me for a long moment, weighing risk against reward, power against consequence. Then he exhaled. 48 hours, he said. Bring the money. All of it, in full. I will. He nodded once. And Miss Chen, yes, if you cheat us... His voice dropped to a whisper. We won't come for you. My pulse slowed. We'll come for him. Daniel's breath hitched audibly. I didn't let my expression change. You won't have to. I said, Because I don't leave loose ends. The man lifted his chin, smirked faintly, and slipped back into the shadows as silently as he had appeared. We watched his figure disappear one breath, two, three, until the night swallowed him whole. For a moment, neither Daniel nor I spoke. He sank onto the curb, burying his face in his hands. He was shaking not from fear, but from the unbearable shame of realizing what my presence had protected him from. After a long, heavy silence, he whispered, "Sarah, I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "You didn't deserve any of this." "No," I said quietly, "but I'm strong enough to handle it." He looked up at me, eyes red, voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix myself." "You start," I said gently, "by not expecting me to fix you." He nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. I stepped toward my car. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To end this," I said softly, "for good." Daniel swallowed. "Can I come?" I turned to him. This broken man, this flawed man, this man who had once been my childhood protector and later became the weight I carried without being asked. "You can follow," I said, "but you can't hide behind me." He nodded. Then he stood. And for the first time in years, he looked like a man willing to face his consequences. I got into my car, hands steady on the wheel, because I wasn't just going to pay a debt. I was going to burn down the entire system that threatened my family and rebuild something stronger in its place. The city felt different that night, sharper, colder, as if it sensed the shift inside me. Neon signs reflected off wet pavement, lights shimmering through puddles like broken constellations. I drove with a clarity I hadn't felt in days, a calm that came not from the absence of fear, but from the presence of purpose. Daniel followed behind me in his old Honda, headlights trembling in the rearview mirror every time he hit a pothole. I wondered what he was thinking. Regret, shame, maybe both. Maybe something new. The truth was, I didn't know what version of my brother would arrive at the end of this road, but I knew who I would be. The woman who ended the cycle, the woman who refused to inherit her family's silence, the woman who would not bend. I parked outside my hotel, one of mine, the Sapphire Bay downtown, the very first city property I ever acquired. Beneath the warm gold glow of the entrance canopy, the doorman straightened when they recognized me. Daniel walked up behind me, shoulders hunched, eyes darting nervously at the grand lobby as if he didn't belong there. In some ways, he didn't, not yet. But that was another truth he'd have to face on his own. "Stay close," I told him quietly, "and don't talk unless I ask you to." He nodded. Inside, the lobby was lively, travelers checking in, businessmen arguing over dinner reservations, a couple taking pictures beside the indoor fountain. None of them knew a family was collapsing and rebuilding under the same roof. None of them knew the stakes in my bag contracts. Evidence. The last remnants of years of silence. My assistant Evelyn was already waiting on the mezzanine level, a folder under her arm, her posture as sharp as her mind. When she saw us, she descended the stairs with practiced precision, her heels tapping a steady rhythm across the marble floor. "Sarah," she said, leaning in for a brief, efficient hug, "I've reviewed everything. It's bad." "I know." She glanced at Daniel with cool assessment, a look that said she'd read every detail of his mistake and had no patience left for people who drown themselves. "We'll meet in the Sapphire Suite," she said. I nodded. "Let's go." We took the private elevator, one reserved for high-profile guests. Daniel shifted awkwardly, hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. I remembered being like him once, before success carved out a new version of me, a version that didn't shrink in spaces like these. When the elevator opened on the 28th floor, the doors parted into a quiet hallway lit by soft lamps. I opened the suite with a digital key. The lights flicked on automatically. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city skyline, glittering like a promise or a warning depending on where you stood. Evelyn spread documents across the conference table. Daniel hovered by the doorway until I motioned for him to sit. He looked like a student summoned to the principal's office, ashamed and bracing for punishment. "Let's begin," I said. Evelyn opened the folder. The loan is tied to an unregistered lending network operating out of the docks. Their paper trail is intentionally messy. Multiple shell companies, fake addresses, no legitimate licensing. If they wanted to challenge this legally, they'd lose before the case even began. "Except they have no intention of using legal pathways," I said. "Exactly." Evelyn tapped the papers. "Which means the only leverage here is money or power." Daniel swallowed. "I don't have either." "No," I said, "but I do." Evelyn looked at me. "You're planning something. What is it?" "Calls," I said, "and timing." I sat, leaned forward, and steepled my fingers. This group is undergoing an internal fracture. They've been trying to expand their operations, but they need influence, political, financial, territorial, and they won't get any of those things if someone with my reach decides to make their lives difficult. Daniel frowned. "So, what you scare them?" I shook my head. "I don't threaten people like this. I give them a choice." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "The kind that feels like a trap? The kind that feels like salvation?" I turned to the city skyline. They want the restaurant, but what they really want is legitimacy, a foothold in this part of the city. I'm going to offer them something else, something that looks like an opportunity. Daniel leaned forward, nervous. You're not giving them any of your businesses, right? Of course not. I don't understand. You don't have to, I said gently. You just have to follow my lead. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. A man answered on the second ring. Chen, his voice was deep, laced with amusement. Thought you disappeared. I need to talk to you. I said it's urgent. Anything for the woman who saved my merger, he replied. Where? Sapphire Bay downtown, Suite 2801. I'll be there in 10. I hung up. Evelyn blinked. That was fast. He owes me. I said simply. Who is he? Daniel asked. A man, I replied, who terrifies the men who just threatened you. Daniel went pale. Evelyn exhaled. This is going to get complicated. No, I said, this is going to get clean. 10 minutes later, the suite door opened. Leonardo Cruz stepped inside, a man whose presence softened air and hardened spines. He was impeccably dressed, towering, and surprisingly calm for someone with influence in financial and political corridors most people never even knew existed. He gave Evelyn a polite nod, then turned to me. Sarah, he said with a small, curious smile. What storm did you call me into? I gestured to the table. A debt, a family, a threat. He sat without hesitation. Tell me everything. I did. No emotion, no fear, just facts. When I finished, Leonardo remained silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of it all. Finally, he leaned back. The men who approached you work for a syndicate called the East Ridge Collective? I nodded. They're ambitious, he continued, but stupid. They're trying to build influence in this city, but they lack connections and credibility. Exactly why they're dangerous. I said, exactly why they're vulnerable, he corrected. Daniel blinked. Vulnerable. They just threatened my life. Leonardo gave him a sympathetic but unimpressed look. People who roar the loudest are usually the ones with the least power. True strength moves quietly. He turned back to me. What do you want me to do? I want you to let them know. I said that interfering with my family will set them back 5 years in expansion, that every door they want opened will remain shut, that every investor they hope to gain will flee. And what do you want in return, he asked. 3 things, I said. Daniel stared at me, stunned. Evelyn crossed her arms, intrigued. Leonardo waited. 1, I said, they erased the debt completely. Done, Leonardo murmured, because in his world, that was the easy part. 2, they stay away from my family, permanently. He nodded again. Reasonable. And 3, I said quietly, they understand something vital. What's that? Leonardo asked. That a woman who built an empire out of nothing, I said, is a dangerous person to threaten? Leonardo smiled. They'll get the message. Daniel let out a shuddered breath, half relief, half disbelief. But Leonardo wasn't finished. He turned to Daniel, eyes sharp. You owe your sister your life, he said simply. Daniel nodded. I know. And you'll repay it, Leonardo added. Not with money, with accountability. Daniel's voice cracked. I will. Leonardo stood. I'll handle the collective. Expect confirmation by morning. I exhaled slowly. Thank you. He held my gaze. You don't need my protection, Sarah, but you deserve it anyway. And then he left. The door closed quietly behind him. Daniel sank into a chair, face buried in his hands. Evelyn stared in awe, shaking her head. And I stood there still, centered, steady. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. But something deep inside me whispered, this wasn't over. Not with Daniel. Not with my mother. Not with the legacy buried in that restaurant. And certainly not with the fractured pieces of myself I'd spent years avoiding. Some storms don't come to destroy. Some come to reveal the truth. For a long moment after Leonardo left, none of us moved. The city hummed far below the glass, indifferent to the battles fought 28 floors above it. Daniel sat with his elbows on his knees, head bowed, breathing in ragged, uneven pulls like he'd been underwater too long and had forgotten how to surface. Evelyn quietly sorted the papers, but she glanced at me once, an unreadable mix of respect and worry flickering across her features. I stood at the window. My reflection stared back, tired eyes, steady jaw, the faint tremor in my fingers betraying the calm I'd worked so hard to maintain. Behind the glass, lights shimmered like constellations, each one a window into a life I knew nothing about. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of being my family's axis. Every decision I made would tilt us toward survival or collapse. There was no margin of error, not anymore. Sarah Daniels' voice broke through the quiet, small and strained. I turned. He looked lost, like a boy learning the world was far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. His eyes were rimmed, red lashes wet. His hands twisted together and his lap knuckles white. I don't know what to say, he whispered. You don't have to say anything right now, I replied. I should, he insisted, voice cracking. I should tell you I'm sorry. I should tell you I never meant for it to get this bad. I should tell you I didn't know what to do. He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. But the truth is, I think I did know. I just didn't want to do it. I sat down across from him. Say it. He winced. I didn't want to take responsibility. I didn't want to face the people I owed. I didn't want to admit how badly I messed up. Tears welled and spilled over. And I kept thinking you'd come home and fix it like you always do. I kept counting on you even while I resented you for being everything I wasn't. His confession landed between us like a fragile glass, dangerous, sharp, but painfully honest. You could have died, he whispered. If you weren't who you are, if you weren't strong enough, those men, they would have hurt you. Because of me. I didn't flinch. They were never going to touch me. Daniel shook his head violently. You don't know that. I do, I said firmly. Because I wasn't the one who was terrified tonight. He looked up startled. You were. His shoulders sagged under the truth of it. Evelyn finished stacking the papers and quietly stepped into the adjoining room, giving us privacy. I appreciated that more than she knew. Daniel wiped his face with the heel of his palm. I don't deserve your help. No, I said softly, you don't. His breath caught. Then why? Why are you doing this? I looked at him for a long, heavy moment. Because Dad asked, I said. Because Mom is terrified. Because the restaurant is part of who we are. Because it's the only home we've ever known. Not because of me, he whispered. I shook my head. Not because of you. He nodded slowly, painfully accepting that truth like a weight he deserved to carry. A silence stretched between us, quiet but charged. He stared out the window, and for the first time in his life I saw him not as the brother I grew up with, not as the man who disappointed us, not as the son who needed constant saving, but as someone finally awakening to the consequences he'd always feared but never faced. What happens now, he asked. I stood and walked to the table, gathering the final documents. Now we wait for Leonardo's confirmation, I said. Tomorrow morning the debt will be erased. And the restaurant, he asked cautiously. I met his eyes. I'm taking control. His throat bobbed. I figured. You'll still work there, I added. But not as manager, not for a long time. He nodded slowly. That's fair. You'll rebuild trust. With Mom, with Dad, with the staff. And with you, he asked, voice fragile. That I said gently will take the longest. A single tear slipped down his cheek, but he didn't wipe it away this time. I'll earn it, he whispered. I hope so. I walked to the sweets minibar, grabbed 2 bottles of water, and handed him one. He took it, staring at the label as if trying to read meaning from the condensation. Then he looked up at me again. What do I tell Mom, he asked. The truth, I said, all of it. He winced. She'll break. Maybe, I said, but she deserves the truth. And she deserves a son brave enough to face her after what he's done. Daniel leaned back in his chair and covered his face with both hands. I've been weak my whole life. You've been afraid, I corrected. Weakness is refusing to change. Fear is just the first step. He lowered his hands and looked at me. Really looked. You're not angry, he asked. I'm devastated, I said softly. But anger won't fix anything. Accountability will. Daniel nodded. I'll start tomorrow. No, I said, standing. You'll start now. He blinked. Tonight? Tonight, I affirmed. You'll go home. Tell Mom everything. Tell Dad everything. And tell them I'll be there in the morning to finalize the transfer of control. Daniel stood slowly, uncertainly. Are you coming with me? No, I said gently. Not this time. This walk is yours. His breath trembled, but he nodded. Then he took a step closer, hesitant, trembling, unsure, and wrapped his arms around me in a hug I didn't expect. Not needy. Not manipulative. Just human. I stood still for a moment, then lifted my arms and hugged him back, feeling the subtle shattering shift of something old finally releasing its grip between us. Thank you, he whispered into my shoulder, for not abandoning us. I closed my eyes. I never did. He let go first, wiping his face once more. I'll go now, I nodded. Call me after you talk to them. He left the suite quietly. The click of the door closing echoed through the room. For the first time that night, I let myself sink onto the sofa, bones aching with exhaustion. Evelyn re-entered from the adjoining room, watching me with the kind of respect that needed no words. That was powerful, she said. It was necessary. She nodded. And tomorrow, I said, staring at the city lights, I start rebuilding a family that never knew how to stay whole. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. But rest didn't come. Because even though the debt would be gone by morning, the true reckoning for my family, for Daniel, for my mother, for myself, was still waiting in the shadows. Some debts, after all, aren't paid with money. They're paid with truth, and truth costs more. I didn't sleep that night, at least not in any way that felt like rest. I lay on the sofa in the suite with the curtains half drawn, watching the slow sweep of headlights across the ceiling, listening to the hum of the minibar and the distant throb of nightlife 28 floors below. My body was exhausted, but my mind was a storm, each thought crashing into the next, relentless and sharp. At 3:12 a.m., Daniel texted. I told them. They're devastated. Mom is crying. Dad wants to see you in the morning. I'm sorry, Sarah, for everything. I stared at the messages, feeling something ache deep in my ribs. Not anger, not pity. Just a kind of weary compassion for a boy who grew into a man without ever being taught how to ask for help before the damage was too deep. I set the phone down and exhaled into the quiet room. Dawn came in muted streaks of lavender and pale gold across the skyline. The sweet lights dimmed automatically in response to the rising sun, casting long shadows through the glass. I rose, showered, combed my hair back into a simple bun, and dressed in a soft cream blouse and charcoal slacks. No armor, no power suit. Today wasn't about dominance. Today was about closure and beginnings. When I arrived at the restaurant that morning, the street outside was quiet, the calm before the simmering noise of lunchtime crowds. Steam curled into the cold air from the back kitchen vents. The sign above the entrance flickered faintly, the red characters glowing like an old heartbeat. My childhood heartbeat. I took a breath and stepped inside. The restaurant was closed for the morning, chairs still upside down on tables. But my mother was already in the kitchen kneading dough for baozi with movements too precise for someone who'd slept poorly. Her eyes were puffy, her expression brittle but composed. She looked up when she heard me. No anger, no coldness, just complicated grief. You're early, she said quietly. I nodded. So are you. Behind her, the steamer hissed softly. She wiped her hands on a towel, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, Daniel told us everything. I waited. She inhaled, her shoulders trembling. We failed him. The words surprised me not because they were untrue, but because I had never expected her to say them out loud. She continued, voice soft and uneven. We pushed him to be strong, responsible, capable. And when he wasn't, he hid it. From us. From everyone. Her eyes glistened. We made him believe he wasn't allowed to fail. I stepped closer, and me. Her gaze dropped to her flour-dusted hands. We failed you too, in different ways. My breath caught. She swallowed hard. You were always so capable, so independent. You learned to walk on your own before I could teach you. You learned to work without being asked. You learned to take care of yourself so well that we thought you didn't need us. I always needed you, I whispered. Her lips trembled. But we didn't know how to show you love unless you needed us in the same way Daniel did. Something inside me cracked quietly without shattering, like a seam finally giving way. I stepped closer, Mom. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, tears spilled freely. I'm sorry, Sarah. I exhaled. It wasn't everything. It wasn't a perfect apology wrapped neatly and tied with a bow. But it was honest. It was raw. It was hers. I nodded once, gentle, accepting. Then I embraced her. She froze for a heartbeat, then melted into the hug, her arms wrapping around me with a kind of desperate, shaky strength I hadn't felt since childhood. We stayed like that for a long time. When we finally pulled apart, she wiped her eyes aggressively and cleared her throat. Your father's in the back. I made my way to the small office behind the kitchen, where my father sat wrapped in a blanket over his shoulders, a cup of hot tea steaming on the desk. He looked older today, frailer, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. Ah, he said softly. My daughter. Just 2 words, but they held more warmth than entire years of silence ever had. I sat across from him. How are you feeling? Old, he said with a dry chuckle, but alive, thanks to you. I didn't do much. You did everything, he corrected gently. Even when we didn't deserve it. I lowered my eyes, swallowing hard. He gestured for me to hand him the papers in my bag. I placed them on the desk. He looked at the contract one last time, the forged signatures, the predatory clauses, the evidence of how deeply Daniel had fallen into desperation. He exhaled long and weary and pushed them back toward me. All yours, he said. Do what you need to do. It won't be easy, I warned. Nothing worth doing ever is. I nodded. He reached across the desk and placed his hand on mine. His palm was warm, weathered, trembling slightly. I love you, Bao Bei. I'm proud of you. The words punched the air out of my chest. I blinked quickly, holding back tears. I love you too, I whispered. A knock sounded at the door. Daniel stood there, eyes swollen, expression fragile, posture uncertain. My father gestured for him to come in. Daniel stepped forward, hands shaking, and knelt beside my father's chair. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered. I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't know how to say I was overwhelmed. My father placed a gentle hand on his head, an old gesture from childhood, one I thought he'd forgotten. You disappointed yourself harder than you ever disappointed me, he said softly. But now you start again. Daniel nodded, tears dripping onto the floor. My father turned to me. You tell him. I inhaled, steadying myself. Daniel, I said, I'm taking control of the restaurant. Effective today. He swallowed but didn't protest. You'll work here, I continued, but you'll start at the bottom. With accountability, with humility, with transparency. He nodded slowly. I understand. And one day, I said gently, if you earn it, maybe this place can be yours again. His breath caught. I'll do whatever it takes. I know, I said. I believed it. For the first time, I truly did. We spent the next hour talking through logistics, legal paperwork, restructuring, financial triage. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't glamorous. It was messy and raw and human. But it was honest. For the first time in years, we were a family dealing in truth instead of illusion. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Leonardo. Debt cleared. They will not make contact again. Your family is safe. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I turned to my family, my bruised, imperfect, mending family, and said, It's done. My mother bowed her head. My father closed his eyes with relief. Daniel let out a sharp, shuddering exhale and wiped his face again. For the first time in a long time, the weight pressing on my chest eased, not gone, but lighter. That evening after the restaurant closed, I stood alone outside, looking at the faded red sign and the warm lights glowing from inside the windows. The place smelled like childhood and survival and years of unspoken love. Daniel came out with 2 cups of tea. "One for you," he said, handing me one with both hands. I accepted it. We sipped in silence. After a long moment, he spoke. "What now?" Now, I said, "We learned to be a family again." Slowly, carefully, honestly. He nodded. "And you?" he asked quietly. "What do you do now?" I looked at the building, the street, the sky above us, where clouds drifted like softened memories. "I rebuild," I said softly. "Not hotels, not business deals, not empires." He waited. I finished. "I rebuild us." He bowed his head. "Thank you," he whispered. I smiled faintly. "Don't thank me yet." He huffed a quiet, shaky laugh. And for the first time in years, not in crisis, not in anger, not in fear, we stood there together, simply siblings sharing a moment under the streetlights, a moment alive with possibility, a moment I didn't know we would ever get back. That night, I returned to my hotel, stood by the window again, and watched the city breathe beneath me. But this time, I didn't feel like an exile looking in from the outside. I felt like a bridge between past and present, between brokenness and healing, between the girl I used to be and the woman I had become. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone in that space. I felt found, and I realized something. Revenge had once felt like power. But rebuilding, choosing compassion, boundaries, honesty, that was something deeper, stronger, wiser. Power wasn't about destroying enemies. It was about refusing to let pain dictate the future. If you've followed my story this far, thank you. Stories like mine aren't easy to tell or hear, but they matter. If this resonated with you, or if you've ever carried wounds no one else saw or rebuilt something others thought was too broken, please like, share, and subscribe. Your stories matter too, and I'd love to hear them in the comments.